That tune's called Blue Bag's Groove, and that was written by Milt Jackson, one of the originators of the modern jazz quartet, MJQ. Originally it was Milt Jackson Quartet, but it became later known as the Modern Jazz Quartet. And that group was, of course, much later, much further down the road, sort of the resting spot for the Heath brothers. Albert Heath, Jimmy Heath played along with them on many occasions, tenor sax, and Percy Heath on bass. But that John Lewis was the piano player in that group, and John Lewis and Milt got together and did a lot of interesting explorations that were a merging of traditional jazz forms like the blues, which this is, with more classical forms and approaches to performance. And the Modern Jazz Quartet is actually one of the groups that's considered responsible for elevating the jazz idiom in terms of how it was presented in a concert fashion as opposed to being performed in a bar or something like that. They did concert performances and they dressed up, they wore tuxedos actually, and made an attempt to really elevate the presentation of the music, both in how they worked on their preparation, but also just the physical appearance of themselves and how they conducted themselves on stage. So the blues, which this is one of, is an extremely important part of jazz. In other words, I think Wynton Marsalis is the one that says this. You can't have jazz without the blues. It's like, you can't make soup without salt. So the blues itself is an idiom, it's a genre, and it has its own past, present, and future. But it is also a part of the jazz world, which is what we're presenting here. And we take a lot from the blues in different respects. There is, of course, the traditional blues form, which is a 12-bar form. That's what we would call, maybe in the blues genre, we would call that city blues, when you have a fixed 12-bar form, which this is. Bag's Groove is a fixed 12-bar form. Country blues is looser, and the form varies according to the needs of the moment, and the needs of the player. Like Robert Johnson or someone like that would have an elastic form. That's country blues. But the other essential element of the blues is the fact that it comes from Africa and African American heritage. And so this thing that we commonly call what we use when we construct melodies over the blues or when we improvise often is called the blues scale. And we've kind of taken that and used it in the jazz idiom, but really it's what it is an African folk scale. That's and if you look at any kind of folk music from, let's call it folk music, anywhere in the world, whether that's from the Middle East or India or any place, Africa, those scales do not adhere to the Western tonal system, which is what these instruments function on, right? Equal temperament. So when you take any folk scale, whether it's from Bali or China, it's not going to fit on our Western tonal system. So it's like a square peg in a round hole. And in many ways, it's that bending of that folk scale to in some way adhere to the Western or European tonal system that is a kind of a metaphor, so to speak, for African culture and how it fit or didn't fit within our Western culture in the United States. So when we play the sound of the blues, we're playing, see, the interesting part of this is that we're not playing suffering. Some people associate the blues with suffering, but the blues is actually the liberation from suffering. By playing the blues, the player or the singer actually liberates themselves from suffering, and the hope is that the listener is also in that process of witnessing they're liberated as well. So these are important points to remember about the blues.